Great to see you. I joined a session yesterday on part of a workshop that I'm on, and it was all about presenting and sounding energetic and enthusiastic. And they told us to record ourselves and our voices when we start a workshop. And I sounded awful sad and awful low. And I thought, oh my God, there's a little tip for me or for anybody. And the other thing I picked up yesterday, which I don't know, I think I felt it was my duty to share it with everybody. The presenter was talking to us about looking at the camera on your laptop and not looking at the people on your screen. And for about a year in Zoom now, I've been doing this and staring in at the thumbnails. So I'm going to make a real concerted effort today to look at the actual camera on the laptop. And I'd say for everybody else, try and practice it as I'm going through the session, and you realize that actually makes a difference in the way that everybody's sitting in. Now, this is 2 hours of a session talking about finances. It's the best crack you'll ever have. I think that if we can manage to pull some kind of humor out of this, we'll be doing really well. And I'll be looking for your participation in that as we're going along. As I deliver training on lots of different topics, I do have a tendency to veer over and back into things like the governance code and social media and managing volunteers. So if I am straying off the tracks onto those kind of things, they're all completely relevant with the work that you do. So today's session is pretty much looking at systems that one can put in place in their organization. That's not saying that I expect at the end of the session that you're going to take all the tools and templates and go away and have a really efficient system set up tomorrow morning. I'm just going to show you systems that people are using. In certain cases, I am using them myself for managing other aspects of my organization, and therefore I can completely stand over them and tell you that they've given me parts of huge chunks of time back in terms of getting systems set up. So I will start off by sharing my presentation, and I'll be veering over and back looking at templates and tools that we can use. So the first thing that I'm doing last week, for anyone that was at the session last week, we were talking about Canva as a social media tool, and I am using that for my presentation today because I think it's just one of the easier options, and it also gives you an opportunity to record the session in Canva as well if you need to use it in the future. So what we're going to be talking about, and again, I know that some of these topics won't be relevant to everybody, but for the most part, I think we'll have something for everybody in the session. We will be looking at membership fees and management, looking at tools that you can manage volunteer information and fees, ways of monitoring, tracking expenses, creating internal control systems. Now that sounds really, really heavy, but it's really just looking at the charity regulators, documentation and guidelines on what kind of internal control systems groups can put in place. We'll also be talking about annual budgets and setting them up. And I'll be trying to figure out from you is some of the tools that you actually use or some of the systems that you put in place for managing your own organization and what's working and not working. Lastly, I have designed up a little template for grant management. So for trying to track how much has been spent of a grant and how on track you are with expenditure. And while I'm looking at that system, because you've all been so good in showing up for this in the first place, I will also throw in I'll give you access to the database that I have of all the current funds that are out there. So you're getting 2 workshops for the price of 1 today. You won't have to sit through another 2 hours of me talking about funding, but I will give you the database that I normally give in my funding workshops. And we will be having a break at 11:30, so you will get an opportunity to get up and stretch your legs. So I was going to go through and ask you there about what causes the greatest problems in your own organization. Which aspect of financial management causes you the greatest problems? So I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you. And if you can drop it into your chat there, which aspect of financial management causes you the greatest headaches? Is it having nobody to delegate to? Is it finding grants? Is it tracking expenses, mileage? Or are you all completely, okay, Mark, grant applications, you're not alone there, the rest of the world. I suppose part of the challenge with grant applications is A, finding which ones to apply for, and B, finding the lingo as well to put it into them. So do feel free at the end of the session to get in touch, and I'll send you on another presentation that I have on the lingo required for grant applications, because I do believe it's another language, and even learning how to speak that language sometimes is half the battle. Anybody else? I'll go quiet now and I'll put the pressure on all of you. I'll say nothing and I'll just stare at my camera until somebody gives in and writes an answer. So I suppose the things that come back to me again and again in working with charities is the fact that very often there may be somebody operating with 1 or 2 people in the organization, or a charity where somebody has 10 staff and they don't actually, the staff don't have the skill set to help out perhaps in financial management. So one of the comments that came in there, different aspects of budget for different aspects of the overall plan, keeping track. Brilliant, Barbara. Hopefully I'll have that solved for you by the end of the session. I think that some of the tools that I'm going to talk you through today will show you how you can stop some of the problems arising before they do, in terms of when new staff come on board and you need to share systems and show people how things actually work in an organization. That's probably the greatest problem that I see out there. Only one person knows how things run. Only one person knows what grants have come in and what portion of the grant has been spent, who the funder is, who the contacts are. So I will show you templates in a bit on how to solve that problem. I will be using a website today that I have designed for this training, and I've put all the links and the templates that we're going to be using into that website. So don't worry about writing anything down or trying to track sites. After the session, I will send it on to Margaret and you'll be able to access everything that we talk about today. Again, I'm giving you a warning that I am jumping through a lot of information, but if you only took bits of it, that would be a win from today's session. So I am just going to come back to you and ask you by a Zoom thumbs up, how many of you have heard of Airtable? Roisin, great. Michael, a little bit. Okay, so I'm raving about Airtable at the minute, but before I start raving about it and telling people how great it is, I want to get a thumbs up on how many of you love Excel. Aidan, you're we have one. Okay, Rebecca, if you love Excel, you will appreciate what this does. If you hate Excel, you will also appreciate what this does. It is a new kind of, I think it's going to be one of those tools that will become a household name in the future, like Excel or Word. And I'm just going to get up Airtable in the background here before I share it with you and try and explain a little bit more about what you can do with it. So it is a tool that's like Excel, but it also has a number of different functions in it. So it's like a project management tool, and it's like a marketplace for templates. Now, I hope you can all see that. This should try and explain it a little more. So this is the logo for Airtable. And when you sign up, you can look at 4 different sections here. So there's a thing called templates. And when I click into templates, it's broken down lots of different templates for systems that people can put in place in different organizations. So it's a business tool, but it can also be used for community or non-profits. So here I'm going to click into groups, clubs, hobbies, or if I go down further, you'll see there's a section on non-profits. So when I click into groups, clubs, and hobbies, there are templates set up here for soccer clubs, camping trips, very much. This one, actually, Kids Scouts, is the one I'm going to click into. Just to give you an example, when you find a template and you click to use the template, it opens up a template that looks like it looks like an Excel document. The difference, though, is that it has greater functionality than an Excel spreadsheet. Now, I'm no Excel expert, and if you are really good at Excel, you can contradict me and say you can do all that in Excel. But what I like about this is you can set up a system whereby you can track information like membership, but you can also add fields with tick boxes in it. And when you tick or untick the fields here, you can produce a report based on the yes, no's in the tick. So if you wanted, say, for example, this is just an example of a Scouts organization. If you wanted to set up different sections managing different information, for example, if you needed to keep track of information like equipment that an organization has, rotas, upcoming trips, fees, or even adding items to a calendar, that's one of the useful things that you can do for it. Now, this is just taking a quick look at it. I'll show you more detailed templates that I have designed that are more suitable for Irish organizations. And what I mean by that is I have set up, taken a template like that, and I have changed it for a GAA club. So if we click in here, and I don't know if there's anybody on this call that's a member of a GAA club, but this will give you a greater idea. So I've broken it up and set it up so that you could list players here, then you could have membership fee here paid. If you need details on position, address, email address, particular notes, or track of games, you can put it in there. If there's a separate section then for tracking, oh my God, I have Donegal versus Tyrone in here, I better move on quickly. If I have fundraising events, you can list all your fundraising events in advance. You can put in the dates, and then you can view the events by a yearly calendar, so you know in advance what you have coming up. You can put in role of your committee so that when anybody's coming on board, you have all the attachments with their roles and duties in there. Then I have minutes, templates, committee reviews, and social media details, and then governance code, principles and templates. So that's just a simple example of how you could use Airtable for one organization tracking multiple amounts of information within the one sheet. Now, I have also used it, if I go back to the marketplace or the templates, I have used it also for tracking training sessions, Excel training, different courses that I'd be using, and I have it for funding. And at the end of the session, we will look at the funding database and how I use it for that. So if I go back again and look at templates, it's broken down into all different kind of templates that people can set up. So if it was social media, events, is anyone planning a novel? You can go in and set up the plan there. If you were organizing a fundraiser, you can also go in and use that template. And I'll show you what that looks like. Now, for anybody here organizing events, managing your finance, your sponsorship. So this, again, it's taken off an American template, but to give an example, you could have venues, schedules is particularly useful if you were, I use this for organizing events for a festival. And so I manage the schedule and the budget and the sponsorship and the volunteers all within the one event system. I'll stop sharing and come back to you because I hate talking to myself and looking at the screen. But in managing managing festivals or fundraising events, half of the challenge is keeping track of all the sponsorship, all the donations that are coming in, all of the ticket sales, all of the volunteers with the different roles, managing things like health and safety, also managing the roles and who's supposed to do what. So I have found that that was a complete game changer for managing budgets and delegating, keeping track of expenses. But while I'm talking about Airtable, you can actually use a simple Google Sheet for doing something similar. And I have an easier version than that done, which I'll show you through the website in a few minutes. On a very simple level, one of the tasks that we would have had problems with, I say we, in a festival committee that I was part of, we'd be selling tickets for an event and 10 people would be gone off selling tickets. 10 people and 10 tickets. We never knew what the current status of the ticket sales were. And we're constantly ringing around going, how many of you left and how many have we left? And are we sold out and are we not? So we started just using a simple Google Sheet for tracking how many people had, how many tickets people had, how their sales were doing, and you could just, and then shared the one sheet with people. So you could come in and just look at it and see in real time what was actually left in terms of sales. Then I also use it for tracking expenses. Is there anybody on here that, I know you're probably all here as part of your day job, but anyone here a treasurer with a volunteer organization aside from your day job? Okay, Aidan, you're the Excel lover as well. So, Aidan, if you can unmute for a second. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot there now. But in your role as a treasurer, what would be the greatest problems you encounter?
Well, because it's a volunteer group, I suppose time is often the thing. So I use Excel to keep track of things, but as we get busier, then things become more complex. You get different grant applications for funding, and you have to manage those within the overall, but also as a unit.
Yeah, and I suppose the biggest challenge for people is traditionally where we met in person, we could hand out the sheets, and now since lockdown, showing multiple people information all in different areas has become a bit of a challenge. So I suppose there's a project management element to managing finances as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we're in that position yet where we've trained people up enough on very basic skills. I'm finding as well lately that an awful lot of organizations have Office 365 or Microsoft Office installed recently enough, and nobody knows how to use half the tools in it. They're probably using it to about 10%, 20%. So just by a a quick thumbs up, how many of you use Microsoft products for work in your work situation? Okay, and how many are using Google? Okay, so a lot of you. I think what people are missing is the sharing sheets and the sharing information. So I will go back to Airtable, and I'll show you what I'm talking about there. So one example that you can do if you are organizing an event, you can click the share button here and share it with a number of different people, and they're all viewing the one form. So you get an idea and everybody's updating it then in real time. So what that means is at any given time, there's no email and attachments over and back or Excel spreadsheets. And I'm finding even in my own job that very few people are sharing Excel spreadsheets. They'll always send them as an attachment that needs to be downloaded and uploaded again and sent back. And it'll be just so much easier if we just shared them and updated things in real time. So I'm going to go back a second again and show you that while we looked at templates here that you can use, there's also a thing called Marketplace, where people can look at higher development tools that they can use for it. But in the universe option here, this is where people have shared their own templates that they have developed for. So if anybody develops one, they can share it with the public as a template, put it in there. And so this was particularly useful at the start of lockdown last year, where a lot of people shared COVID information and stats and systems for managing things. So it's worth the look. But I think that we're missing a trick at the moment. I think that we haven't, as organizations, I don't think that we're sharing enough information, and I feel that there's potential here for the charity sector in Ireland. If you look on this, there's very, very little, there's virtually no Irish templates up. So I think that if we change that, and I'm going to try and change that through my training in talking to different organizations to try and encourage them that when they do develop systems that work for their organization, to share them, if you have the expertise, to share them for the benefit of other community organizations. So I will go back to I go back to my presentation now, just 1 second. Has anyone any questions before I go on any further?
Alex, just a question I'm asking, is that a free version? The Airtable, is that free or is it there?
Yeah, actually you need to be careful with it. I made the mistake in the beginning. You can use it for free. It's when you add collaborators to it. So when you're sharing it with people, be really careful about the settings that you use when you share. So if you share with, we'll say I shared that document with Aidan, and I shared it, gave him full editorial collaboration rights, then I'd have to pay for his account for the month as a user, and it's like $10 a month per user. However, if you share with somebody but you don't give them editorial access to create documents, you just give them the view option, then you're not paying for it. But that's a mistake that is really well hidden in it, that you could go, for example, I made that mistake in the beginning when I shared the grant templates. I probably shared with, in the first session, 20 people or something, and they logged on and set up an account. And when I went to upgrade my account, I was being charged for all of those as users at $10 a month. I was like, oh my God. But I realized then that it's just that I shared collaborative access. If you just share the right to view, then it's a really, really useful tool. I will give you a look at the website now that I have created for this session, and close it down. And I have the links for all the templates that I've created in Airtable. So I'm just going to share that website with you now. So for this session, I have all the things that I'm going to go through are in this website. Down the bottom, I have this section here on Airtable GA template, Airtable funding database, Airtable form example, grant tracker, and Canva reports. But I'll go through these in the second half of the session. So I'm going to leave the funding bit till the last, because that's usually the piece that people are most kind of interested in accessing. But I suppose one thing that I didn't say there that is really, really important is there's an option to add forms to it. So if you wanted, you could actually create a form in it and have it as a membership form or a volunteer sign up form. And then once people sign up through the form, it's automatically going into the database. So you're not doing your work twice. You're not getting your forms and then trying to transfer them over and put them into an Excel spreadsheet. You can also use it for HR purposes. So if you're recruiting people and you wanted to manage the recruitment process through it, it's another example. Now, what I have used it for, and I think that this is one of the challenges that I've seen from people when they're applying for grant applications remotely. And this was always a challenge before lockdown, but imagine one person in the organisation is putting in the grant application, and if they're a new member of staff, they don't have access to all the kind of information that they need. So things like the governance documents, like the mission statement, the maybe the BIC and the IBAN. So I have created a form, which I'll show you in a little bit, where you can just send this form to board members, and each person who has that particular piece of information can just submit it through the form, and it goes back into the database. So what I have found, and I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but when I've been filling out grant applications before, I haven't had a way of seeing what have the organisation previously applied for, what have we been successful with, what have we not been successful with, where could we do better, what are the targets that we've set as an organisation. And I find that that's a missing piece of the puzzle as well. Groups aren't setting out a financial target for fundraising at the start of, I'm not saying all groups, but I've seen it with smaller groups, especially voluntary organisations. There's a bit of an ad hoc sort of an approach to fundraising. So it's kind of like we will, maybe we'll do this and maybe we'll do that. There isn't a very specific plan set out at the start of the year with a target, fixed events. And again, I'm conscious we're in lockdown and I'm talking pre-lockdown, but I've seen when organizations do that and they start using the annual plan, then suddenly it cuts out all of the messing that goes on. And when I say the messing, I mean the random fundraising ideas that pop up at meetings and the suggestions from people. Well, maybe we'll do this, and be organising an event in about 2 weeks with no resources, no volunteers, and one person's left organising the full event, probably the staff member. And the board have suggested the great idea, but the staff member is the one left with doing all the work. So that's where I think having your annual plan, which I'll look at in a second, is really, really useful. Okay, so the grant tracker is there. Yeah, I'll look at that afterwards. So some of the things that I have added into this website, internal financial controls. This is taken from the Charity Regulators website. So if I click on the link to this, and I don't know if that's open, if you can let me know, Margaret, if you can see that, or do I need to share it?
No, yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, okay. So this document is taken from the Charity Regulators website, and it's an internal financial controls document that our guide really to with systems that people can put in place in their organization. Now, I'm conscious when I look at this, it's 36 pages, but when it comes to actually developing, and I don't know what stage you're all at with your governance code documentation, this is actually really useful for helping to put your policies and procedures in place. I know that it's very, very there's a lot of information in it, but it's a guideline really for people. So looking at ways that they manage their income and expenditure, or sponsorship, donations, managing tracking the way that they tracking simple income and expenditure is something that I see that groups actually really struggle with. And I mean smaller groups using an Excel template just for tracking what has come in from grant income, donations, sponsorships, etc. I'm finding a lot of groups don't actually have the basic Excel skills to use a template to kind of track simple expenditure. Or I'm finding that staff members tend to say, well, the administrator will do it, so I don't need to learn that, or I don't need to figure it out, or the accountant will do it, or the treasurer will look after that. And so people tend to put their head in the sands, where they could actually just read up a little bit on some of the controls that could be put in place. So in here, there's guides on banking and monitoring of expenditure. So things like keeping and maintaining records, safeguarding assets, prevent and detect fraud, and defining roles and document policies. I am not going to go through the 36 pages of the document, you'll be pleased to know, but what I do want to point out is that as part of the governance code templates, there are templates that you can get around policies and procedures for managing. And when I talk about putting systems in place, I'll stop sharing and come back to you. Very, very simple systems around decisions around petty cash and decisions around how much. The biggest problem, and I said this before to you on the anyone that was on one of the earlier sessions, biggest problem that I see is reimbursing volunteers for expenses incurred. And if not having proper policies in place around, and when I say that, see that volunteers will sometimes take on expenses themselves out of the goodness of their heart that haven't been kind of, when I say authorized by the charity or the organization, I mean, it isn't a real formal setup, but it could be something as simple as a volunteer using their mobile phone for organizing an event, but coming close to the event, discovering that they're spending a lot of their own money on credit, or A lot of the one I hear again and again, and you're going to say, no, this doesn't happen, but I hear it all the time. I hear disgruntled volunteers giving out about expenses on paper and printing and phone credit. And it's the difference between hanging on to volunteers and losing them, because people they build up resentment for expenses that nobody asked them to actually incur, but they incur them nevertheless. And so simple things like that, people not having a system in place or haven't had a discussion about, or even informed volunteers not to actually spend any of their own money at the cost of the charity, that make it quite clear to them what the rules are and what policies are in place. Can anybody give me an example of systems that you have in your organization for informing your volunteers around expenditure or even financial spending? Anybody? So I think that another problem that arises is people not having the treasurer's report. Yeah, really good point, Michael. We have, I was saying this when it comes to chairing meetings and running meetings effectively, that just having the treasurer's report with, I've sat in meetings before where nobody mentioned the money, and then you have volunteers kind of going, how much money do we actually have? Again, this is not for bigger organizations, but in smaller voluntary organizations, how much money do we have? What's in the bank? Nobody should actually be asking that or having to ask it, because it puts volunteers in an awkward position. So it should be something that's just automatically done by normal part of normal procedures in the meeting. Also, decisions around expenditure that can be incurred without having to run it by the organization. So small expenditure, things like that are, yeah, just putting proper procedures in place. I'm going to go back here to the document. Another issue that comes up again and again is and I don't know what percentage of people on the call today are CSP funded organizations or public funded CSP projects, but having financial reserves in place in the organization as well is another issue that causes a lot of stress for CSP projects, in that they may be struggling just to get by with day-to-day expenses, and then they also have to have money put aside in reserve for a rainy day. And I suppose I come back to you on that. This is something I heard organizations giving out about for years, and then something like the pandemic comes and income is completely wiped out, and nobody, like up to this, all I ever heard is people saying, we don't have the money for financial reserves and we're being put under pressure for it. And even when you're putting a risk assessment in place for the organization, and having the rainy day fund there has been listed as one of the really important things that you need to do, organizations don't take it seriously enough. And I'm part of a voluntary organization myself, and it's one of the things that causes rows again and again. And I don't know, between members, is just how much do we keep in reserves and how much do we spend to do our activities. And half the group will kind of say we're saving way too much for the rainy day, and the other half will say, well, we need to be actually doing stuff and spending the money. So it's a tricky one. But I can't emphasize enough, I would have been one of the people who erred on the side of, I think you don't need to keep way too much financial reserves. And now I've changed my mind completely and kind of said, yeah, do do have a rainy day fund and have the safety net there where possible for your organization, and make the point to your board the importance of it. I'm just going to check if there's any questions there in the chat. Mark, you asked, how does Airtable differ from Slack? Well, I use Slack more as a communication tool. I haven't used it for half of the, I suppose, internal. I haven't used half of the development tool, half of the apps internally in it that you could be using. So I don't know whether I'm going to answer that question correctly, other than it probably, the communication element isn't as strong. It's more of a systems element. There is the option in it to also talk to team members and use the at function and mention them and delegate tasks. But I think, and I find it actually, it is a good question, Mark, because I know that one of our volunteers tried to bring Slack in and get us all into drag us into the technological era, and it didn't work because everybody, and I'm finding it I'm part of about 3 Slack groups, and about 20% of people know how to use Slack. And so it's great when it's got the bells and whistles, but if nobody knows how to use it properly, it's not really effective. In the same way that I always say to organizations about having a website as well, it's fantastic having a really snazzy website that looks great, does lots of things, but if nobody in the organization knows how to update it or keep any of integrate the social media feed, so sometimes simple is better. Okay, so for the next 15 minutes before the break, I am going to just scroll through the rest of this. One of the sections in it again is income from public collections. You'll see that there is a part of the website here around fundraising guidelines and how income from events should be managed. Another issue that I've seen arise around fundraising is, I suppose, sponsorship coming in and groups making commitments to sponsors that they haven't got the authorization to make, because there isn't very clear guidelines on what they will be given if they sponsor an organization. So having clarity on that as well is also important. The biggest mistake I see groups making, as well as spending too much money on tickets where they're unnecessary, are not using booking systems for events. So the first thing I would say, if you're doing a fundraising event, and I see lots of organizations, they don't treat it like a business. They'll spend too much money in organizing the event and actually affect the bottom line, because they don't they spend too much before they've earned anything in fundraising. So anything where you can cut down and keep it simple. I was with an organization that was spending a fortune on getting tickets designed up and printed that weren't really even necessary, and spending a lot of money on graphic design, printed materials that, when a lot of the events were actually being shared online, so they weren't really necessary. In terms of I suppose on a very basic level, and it depends what organization is here, if we are talking about pricing for events or pricing items that pricing products that you're selling as an organization, and I'll come back to you because I don't know how relevant it is to the various organizations attending today, how many of you are actually having to put pricing structures in place for services that you provide. But the one thing that I see again and again is social enterprises apologizing for charging for things and not having proper pricing structures in place because they aren't working out the costs of, they're not doing a proper pricing, doing the research on what it's costing them to provide a service, and therefore afraid to actually charge a price. And I know before I go any further on this, that everybody, because it's 80% of the people I work with are community projects or charities. So I'm not saying this foolishly, but I really do have to make a case to people for watching their expenses and their outlays in terms of the services that they're providing. And on a very, very simple level, I'll give you an example of an organisation that I went into once that I was working with. I won't say where they were, but it was an organisation that had 7 CSP staff that held events in the community, and they were losing money left, right and centre, and they were reliant pretty much on grant expenditure. And when I went in, I realised that everyone who came in the door got tea and biscuits. If they only popped in for a query, there was a cup of tea given out and a biscuit and a big chat. And when I started looking into the work that was done around energy efficiency, cutting down on costs for heating and electricity, their biggest expense was on milk and biscuits in the year. And it sounds like the tiniest thing, but the manager just hadn't actually really worked out what things were costing. They were spending too much on fundraising, and they were also not competitively getting quotes from different service providers for getting better value for money on services that they were giving out. I also see this in terms of working with creative communities. And when I say that, I'm talking about people who are selling craft products that are maybe made on site. I see it again and again that people aren't selling enough. They're not pricing for the time that they put into it, or the labor, or advertising, or staff. And so I have to, and I'm going to particularly mention training as a service here, because I can't emphasize enough how many times I've seen organizations lose money on training hand over fist all around the country, because it's costing them to pay a trainer, it's costing them to rent a room, it's costing them to advertise and assign a staff member, and usually they're not charging for it. And I'm seeing that people will book for events and not show up, and probably take up a place for somebody else who should be there. That's just one example that I'm given of. So when I say to people, if you charge a minimum fee for anything, everything that you give for, and again, I get people jump down my throat on this all the time, because they say we're a charity or we're a social enterprise and we're here to help people. Still, I make the case that if you don't assign a fee to anything, people don't respect it. And you can fight with me all you like on that. And I even agree that, or I suggest that people reimburse. Sorry, Rebecca, if you want to unmute and actually.
Yeah. That is the one, yeah. Food station building. I just put this.
It was just saying
Rebecca,
that,
do you want to share that point?
I was just saying that it's very difficult for ourselves to cost things properly here when we're sort of in competition with the likes of Donegal Council. We're the Railway Heritage Centre here in Donegal Town, and obviously the OPW are now opening up all their sites completely free of charge, and the few people that would come through the door would be like, oh, how come you're not free?
I'm so sorry, Rebecca. There's just background noise there, and I can't fully get the. But I think
is that any better at all?
Okay, everyone is muted apart from Rebecca, so I'm not sure what's happening there. Ailish?
It's part of this here. Yeah, so we have some.
So she's just saying Nigel word would cost properly and fully, but I know that they're competing. Yeah, and you're now competing. I think I read that the OPW sites are going to be free for this summer, so it's going to be a real challenge for. You're okay, Rebecca? I just don't know what it was. The background noise. I appreciate that, you know, it is a challenge for people costing, but I'm seeing people losing money left, right, and centre for selling crafts that took forever. I also see it in charity shops where people are reselling very high quality goods at way underpriced and losing money. For that, I'm mentioning to any group, look at Thriftify. I think I mentioned them again last week. Thriftify are an online website that are allowing people to sell charity donations online or set up a site for an organization. Thriftify are trying to counteract that. They're trying to look at high quality donations and get a proper return on investment for organizations. So that's one of the that's one of the challenges. When I go back again, I was about to say to you, if you even reimburse people and you charge them for something, getting the initial registration fee will mean that people take seriously if they have a place for something. And if they can't afford it, just even reimbursing people on completion of something is an incentive to kind of keep numbers up. But I see it again and again where people are just losing money and not and afraid to charge and not able to actually have the conversation about why things cost what they do or why they need to charge a fee. Okay, so I think actually I might stop for the break there. It's 25 past and we'll come back here in 10 minutes. And for the second half, I will start looking at income and expenditure templates and grant databases and grant management systems. So in the meantime, if you just turn off your camera, you're all on mute anyways, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody. On here and take a look very quickly at a very simple income and expenditure template in Excel for managing grants. I'm also going to look at one in Airtable, but I'm going to share this with you now because when I talk to groups and they struggle with Excel, I try and say that you don't actually need to set up all the templates as long as you have the ability to go in and type in the figures, then it'll work quite well for you. This is a template that was taken from the Arts Council, shared it as an income and expenditure template for just tracking grant applications, but you can change it for whatever you need it to do. So I'll just explain very, very briefly, and I won't go into the details, but you'll have access to this. So it's just an income and expenditure report done up in Excel, so you can change it for whatever grant or scheme that you need. If you type in the income in the top figures here, you just put in the income at the top and the figure will come in here in yellow, and in the bottom section you put in your expenditure and you'll see that your income is down here and whatever you put in. So if you put in the same figure again, you'll see you've got nothing left at the end. So basically you can keep track of it, your expenditure as you're going with the simple tool. So if I delete that and just put it back in, we still have our figure. If you want to add in extra income that comes into the organization and start with, so if you wanted to put in sponsorship or local authority grants or donations. It's a really, really simple template, but it actually works in the sense that I don't think that your employees need to have a huge level of skill to be able to type into it. In the past, I see that people just don't use them because maybe they don't have access to the right template or they're afraid of Excel. That again is just a very simple example. And that is on the website, which I will share with you now. So that's listed there in Excel template on the website. I went through the internal financial controls with you, and the link to that guide is there. Pubble's guide for managing better is there. That's very, very detailed. I'm just leaving it in as a link. This is guidelines for fundraising from the public. Again, I'm not going to go through that because it's quite a detailed guide, but you still have it. And this is just a link to resources for corporate social responsibility. Just a list of information that people can access in relation to policies from particular funders around corporate social responsibility. Now, I mentioned basic templates that you can use for ticket sales or apps that you can use. I'm mentioning something here, Coda, and I'll show it to you in a second. But on a very basic level, I'll click into the ticket sales one here and hope that you can see it. All right, this is a very, very simple Google sheet. And just to double check, you can see that, Margaret, because sometimes when I share a new...
You can, yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is the example that I was given earlier about if you were selling tickets for a raffle or a fundraiser or anything, just put in the names of the 5 people that are selling, put in the amounts that they have, and each time, and then share the document, share the document with them. So in this case, when I click on share, it will ask you to add the people that you want to share the document with, and you just put in their email. And you'll see that you can change the access that anybody has from the document. So who can read it. So currently it's on anyone on the internet with this link can view it. If I click change, and you'll see, like what I mentioned in Airtable earlier, anyone with the link, or if it's restricted, if you don't want anybody being able to access it. So I've clicked anyone with the link, and here you can control whether they can edit the document or whether they can comment or whether they can view on it. So I currently have this one done on view, but if you were creating your own one, just set up something simple and give editor rights to these 5 people. Email it out to them and click share, and then they can start updating the document in real time. So I've just put instructions there at the bottom. This is just an example. Don't try and edit this one, but it's a tiny thing. I also use Google Sheets for keeping track of registrations for courses. And once upon a time, if I was out on the road and bookings were coming in, I wouldn't be able to take them if I was driving or whatever. And I changed that where I had an admin person taking all the bookings. They would put in, say, 50 people here, and we color coded the details based on if something was an initial inquiry, if it was confirmed, if it was booked. So changing the colors then again from red to green, and green for all confirmed bookings. And we all shared the document. So if there was 3 people taking bookings for an event, you weren't kind of going over and back and sharing an Excel spreadsheet and trying to check who has what. We had the one working document all the time, and then you could actually see when something was nearly full by the color coding on it. So you didn't even have to look at all the names or the details. The color at one glance would tell you if something was full up or not. And I just think that Google Sheets or whatever you're using, if it's Excel in the newer versions where you are sharing the document, it just makes so much more sense for everybody to be working in the one shared document. So that is the Google Sheet. In this case, I put in an invoice template just for creating an invoice in Google Sheets. Now, I use an actual accounting package for creating my invoices, but if you're not using an accounting package, and I'd say you probably all are in organizations, if you just needed to create once-off invoices, you can do it with that template in Sheets. But I'll come down and talk to you about accounting packages. So I use, and I stopped sharing and actually ask you because I'd be interested to see what people are using. I use an Irish company called Bullet, and I used to recommend these to every single community organization that I met because it was free, but they've started charging. So it's, I say they've started charging for more advanced features. This is still, I'd recommend it to somebody if they're only doing 1 or 2 invoices a month. It's an Irish company, and the reason I'm recommending it is because they don't have, this will sound daft, if there's any accountants, I'll stop sharing and come back to you. If there's any accountants here, please forgive me, but they don't have any accounting lingo on the website. So they've changed all the words. Somebody's asking about payroll. I'll come back to you on that in a second. All the lingo on Bullet financial package, they don't say words like debit and credit or debtors and creditors. They've changed all the lingo. So it's things like I bought something, I paid something, I got paid. So if you're somebody that struggles with getting your head around accounting, and which when I've used it in training before for people setting up a business from scratch, and they loved it because it took away a lot of the fear that people had around financial terminology. So it also, for me and for my business, at the start of the year, I can go in and set up recurring bills. So things like your phone bill, your bills that you know are set every month. So things like, again, the website fees, any subscriptions that are coming out monthly, you can set them up in advance and they're automatically done for the year. So in terms of accounting, I highly recommend it if you have a budget for paying for a piece of software. If you don't, and that's what I want to know, does anybody, how many of you here by a thumbs up are using an accounting package already? Because I want to just hear the recommendations. Okay, Edel and Michael. Edel, do you mind unmuting and telling me which one you're using?
We use TASBooks.
Yeah, and how do you find it, or have you been using it for years?
Yeah, I've been using it for years, but we don't have a lot to do in it.
Yeah.
Monthly accounts, and then we had an option to get into Sage because they own TAS, and whenever you updated, they offered to put that on. But no, the TAS is fine.
Yeah. I've only got experience of using Bullet and Sage, not Taz, but Sage I really struggled with from a learning curve in the beginning, getting set up on it. But once I got set up, I was like, why aren't you using this for years? Just made it so much easier in terms of payroll and reports.
Payroll, we use CallSoft, which is great, really great. Yeah.
Will you type that into the chat for payroll?
Yeah.
So, and is there
Yeah.
anybody else here can answer Rebecca's question in terms of payroll there? Because I've only experienced with Sage, but it didn't have a discount for nonprofits, and I don't know one that does. That doesn't mean there isn't one out there. I think that, yeah, I'm recommending Bullet. Bullet does payroll and invoicing, and if you're only doing a few transactions, like up to about 5 a month, it's free. But if you're doing more than that, so CallSoft for payroll, great. Thanks, Udell.
No
Mike,
problem.
you mentioned as well. Which one are you using, or?
We use CallSoft for payroll, which is a very good package, and it's not terribly dear. Like, it's less than €200 for the entire year, and it's got a very good support.
Yeah.
You can do just about everything on it that you would ever want to do.
Okay.
Now we got Sage, introduced Sage last year for our bookkeeping. Another section of the company are also using Sage Payroll. We found it extremely difficult to get to grips with, so we've had to source training through the ETB and how to use it. And I've had to go off and do a financial accounts course to understand double entry bookkeeping.
Well, I won't say I'm delighted to hear you say that, but I'm glad that it was just me. I think I wasted 2 months trying to get to grips, and I'm telling you, I was up at night trying to read up on Sage stuff. So when I got Bullet then for my own organization, I was like, oh my God, this is a walk in the park, because it gave simple steps. It was very intuitive. It asked things like create a new client, do an invoice, create a bill, pay a bill, very, very simple, jargon-free terminology. And then it linked up with Ross as well, and it also gave really good reports. And so when it came to October in our house, traditionally was a very stressful time for self-employment returns and accounts, until I got the accounting payroll system in, because everything was done as I was going along, and I wasn't kind of leaving everything till August, September to do it lastminute.com. And so I couldn't, I'd go door to door selling a simple accounting package, again, only if you're doing a small amount of transactions. You do have to pay for it. So if you have a budget, it's currently 30 a month for me for Bullet, but if you're somebody who's already paying out not a fortune, but if you're paying an accountant, then at the end of the year, and I see some people are using the payroll and an accountant as well, so it does all add up, and you're not going to find any free version. Currently, there's an American website called Xero, and I know some people use that for invoicing and accounts, but they have been taken over by, there's Xero and there's Wave, but they're quite American. So I'm going to go back and show you the other alternative. I'll just close a few windows down here. Zoho Books is listed as one, and that's currently free, but it's not as user-friendly as Bullet, but it's not as hard as Sage, and it is a really good option for just getting started. It's currently free, but at the end of the year, you'll have to pay for it. So at least if you were thinking of trying out an accounting system, have a look at Zoho Books. I think it's more focused on products, as in there's a lot of, whereas I'm selling services and this suits, but it's still definitely worth the look. And in fact, this whole company, Zoho Creator, has, if there's anyone that's very techy, they have a lot of systems for running an organization. So things like setting up a database, like a CRM system for managing your all your information around volunteers and members, etc. I also mentioned, oh yeah, Bullet, I forgot to mention, has a link as well where you can, and I don't have an iPhone, so I don't know if they've done this for Android, but if you have an iPhone, it also has an option to take pictures of your receipts and upload them into the system, and it tracks your receipts. But there are other options. So there's one listed here called Smart Receipts, where again you can take photos, and the artificial intelligence will actually track the details on the receipt and upload them. Is there anybody using a tool like that at the minute? Anybody using anything for managing receipts or expenses? No. Okay. Another problem, and I'm saying problem, it mightn't be a problem for any of you. Any of you having problems keeping track of mileage isn't an issue these days. There isn't that many people doing trips, but normally keeping track of mileage expenses, is it an issue? I'll take that as a no. But that's something else that you can use a tool called Coda that I'm about to talk to you about. Now, this is coming with a warning. So Coda that I'm mentioning here, Coda, I could nearly do 3 hours on this alone, but I just want to bring your attention to it. The link for Coda is here. So what it is, it's a new option for developing, how do I explain this? Coding without coding. So it's allowing people to build systems without being able to code. So it uses templates for building documentation. Now this, again, when I said Airtable is the way of the future, Coda is also going to be something you'll hear more of. And I say to every group, anybody working with young people or looking for projects that would engage young people in terms of getting involved in nonprofit work or tech, this is a really, I'd be setting up a course on this, because I think that this is the future in terms of the way that people are going to be building systems and building websites and building apps. It's all going to be through Coda. Now I have clicked into the section on finance here. So excuse the fact that what I look through here is very highbrow and you're not going to, but I just wanted to give it as an example of some of the templates they've already set up. So there is investors, venture capital, investment property, finance handbook, cryptocurrency portfolio tracker, compound interest tracker. These are just documents that people have submitted into the gallery, like the templates in Airtable. And so how this works, again, I could nearly do 2 hours on this alone, but to try and demo to you in a very simple way, Coda is a one-page document and it allows you to add elements to a page, be it a database or a link. So we'll say there, if it allows you to type a piece of text and then to put a little table into it, an interactive table, and also allows you to add elements to a page. So if you wanted one page with 50 different tables all in on the one page. If you wanted to add interactive elements, so again, I go back and give the example. If you were running a festival, you could effectively have your festival event name here at the top. You could add in a database with volunteers. You could have a line with budget, expenses. You could have a line with where you add in a video, and you could add in Google Maps, you could add in social media links. So the one-page document, instead of, I suppose, having all your information in 10 different places, you would, like with the other tools, just share the document, and everybody that had access to it could update it in real time. So if you had a few different people, so in theory, with the coded document as well, you could have volunteers having access to the one page and submitting their expenses into it without you ever really having them. They could just send in a form and update their expenses. Now, I'm conscious that the example I gave you, because this is finance, they're all quite heavy looking templates, but there are, if I go back to this thing called Doc Gallery, there's an awful lot simpler kind of documents that people have created. So you can go in and break it up into categories of health, nutrition. I went into finance, but if you wanted to go into events, marketing, sales, if I clicked into business operations, there's this, like a return to workplace guide. There's OKRs, which I'm going to say is objectives, key results. It's like KPIs for business. It's planning and tracking. So there's hundreds of templates in there. And again, I'll be doing workshops on those kind of drag and drop tools that you can use. But for the benefit of this one, I just wanted to list it as one of those solutions that are out there. And like what I said earlier about Airtable, you could actually create your own documents and submit them up to the gallery. So I would see that as a good way, if you are kind of techie, as a good way of getting a bit of PR for your own organization, or bringing traffic back to your own website. If you do have an organization working with young people, I think it's a really useful project that people could run over the summer, especially because a lot of the funding applications of late have been looking for projects with a digital element to them, and particularly looking for digital innovation and projects that can show new systems being put into place, or organizations thinking creatively around how they share information. And I think that's something that we are doing really, really badly in this country, is sharing access to information. So I have listed an annual plan here as well. And if I click into this, and again, this comes off the Charity Regulators website. And I try and say to groups when I'm talking to them that the plan should never be as scary as it sounds. It can be a one-pager. I know, like organization there, you have to do your strategic plan. Margaret, can you see that Appendix B budget template? Or do I need to share it? Or anybody, can you tell me if you, because I can't.
No, we can't see it.
Okay, grand. So I have to do that as.
Yeah, that's better. Thanks,
Okay.
Sarah.
Perfect, yeah. That's the danger when you're sharing other documents that you open up. Okay, so this is taken off the Charity Regulator website. So it's an annual budget template. Just put in the charity name here, expected income previous year. Now, and again, I'm conscious pandemic will wipe out lots of expected income for organisations, but this is the template that the charity regulator recommends that you use. And the reason this is so important is when it comes to doing your compliance code for the charity regulator, when they're looking for evidence that you have a plan in place, this is the template that they're recommending that you use, and you can use this as your evidence for the compliance record form that you have an annual plan. And again, it's only a one pager, and it's quite like the template that I was looking at there in Excel. So it's expected income less expected expenditure, and just assumptions are. And you'll see at the bottom, again, it's just taken off the template from the charity regulator's website. I have access to hundreds of templates. So between the charity regulator's templates and templates that I've been using myself over the years. So if there's anything I don't mention in the session today that you're struggling with in your own organization, you could do get in touch. It's a matter of just sharing a document for me. And I also stress the importance there for you of having that plan. It's important to have it, but it's also to save a headache for if you're a manager of an organization. And I'll stop sharing and come back to you. I was part of an organization a couple of years ago, and like that, it was very ad hoc fundraising going on. And when I came on board, and I'm not singing my own praises here, but I just had access to information that maybe people didn't have, or templates. We came in and just put the fundraising plan in place at the start of the year, hit a target, and then throughout the year we could manage and go, where are we on the target? Are we on track? Are we ahead or behind? Because I just feel that organizations don't actually monitor that so much. They don't have a target. Yes, they have operating costs to meet and stay afloat, but there isn't usually a number at the end of the year to say this is exactly what we want to raise, and so you can measure at any given time if you're on track with your fundraising efforts. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to look at, we've 25 minutes left, I'm going to look at the Airtable grant tracker. So I'll go back to that. Oh, no, actually, I'll show you the form first. So this is just an example that I put together. This is done up as an Airtable form. So if you were an organization and you wanted to share this link with your group, it's putting in the name, CRO number, company address, phone number, email, website, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, charity number, bank account number, board details, audited accounts, tax clearance, project details, mission statement, annual report, previous funding, notes or any other information that you need to add, and then upload any other relevant documents. That's just an example of the front end of the form, and then I'll show you what it'll look like in Airtable. And what I mean by that, I said it to you earlier on, that the challenge is no one person usually, or maybe just one person usually has access to all that information. But when you come to putting a grant application together, it's a torturous job putting a funding application in on your own in the first place, but having to track down all that information separately is also completely painful, and also figuring out who has which bit of it if you're coming in new into an organization. And I'm saying that from if you're coming in new, but it's also really important from the point of view of having systems in place in your organization that, God forbid, you left in the morning, are you the only one that has the knowledge of where all that information is? Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody in an organization should have access to all of that, but I am saying that it makes it easier if you know where it is. And so if you are remotely, something that used to cause me great pain when I'd be filling out funding applications is you may know your board members extremely well, but when it comes to filling out a funding application, you might know where they live, what their address is, what their phone number is, what their email is off the top of your head. Yes, you can find all that information, but you're going back and you're searching your phone for their email address, and you're looking for, you're ringing someone for the home address, and just those tiny bits of details can be the difference on a day where you're doing a funding application to you being organised or not organised, or the whole job taking longer. Things like your mission statement, and things like, again, your audited accounts, where are they? Again, if you're highly organised, you'll know where they all are, but I don't think that just one person should know where they all are. There should be a plan B for your organisation. So this is something that, a form that I just did up in Airtable, and it's a community project grant tracker. So if we look into, and again, a lot of this is just dummy text that I've put in just to fill and give us an example. So you can look at names of funds like Pobble CSP, Sports Partnership, Community Foundation, and then you can break it down by the type of project. So if you are, and I see a lot of you here are community centres, you'll be working with lots of different sectors. So you'll be putting in there if it's education, or if it's youth, or mentoring, or community, or so you can break it down by, or if you're working with older people, and you have a couple of targets that you're supposed to be working with, you can break it down by the type of project. Then you can track your application status. So if you have put in a fund, you can measure what got funded, what got denied, what are you currently working on, what's in progress. So if somebody walked in the morning and they could look at this and see what's actually happening, or if you needed to do a report for your board on the current state of grant applications, this is useful. You could also put in the type of application, and then the next steps bit, you just put in notes there on, if I expand on that, you can put in notes on what bits are missing or what you need to get. You can put in the deadline. And so when you've put something in under calendar view, if I go back here, I'm looking at something called grid view. And if I look in, you'll see down here, there's view. This is the grid, this is form, this is calendar. So if I click into calendar, it will show me a calendar, and every time that I put it, so you'll see here I've put in Rethink Ireland as a deadline there. If you want to add in all the deadlines, you can look at the start of a month and it'll show you then what's coming up that month. Now I looked at calendar. There's also, if we want to get really technical, and I'll actually just, these are two types of project management views. So if you wanted, again, I'm not going to go into detail on these because this is a thing called Kanban view. So if I click into that, it's like a project management system where you work out tasks based on importance. So if I clicked both of those, these are then done in things that can be dragged and dropped and moved around. So you can kind of prioritize what's first on the list or what's second. And that's just, again, a project management view. That could be a whole course all on its own. And then Gantt charts. Again, there's probably people on the course that know way more about this than me, but these are just ways of tracking project milestones. So if I just put in deadline, so you'll see when people are trying to track projects based by a kind of a timeline view. Now again, they're advanced features that I don't use, but I just wanted to give you an example. So you can go in and look at a form, and that's the form that I mentioned to you. So if you needed to create a form, you can click on add a cover image, add a description, type of project, application status, whatever. If I go back to list of funders contacts, again, all dummy text in here, programs, COVID community response, IT training. These are all just, again, examples. You can put in your annual plan here, and you see that the budget that I just mentioned there, I have listed that in here as in the an attachment. So your budget form with your annual plan would be in there. And then you can look at your fundraising target here and see how much there's your annual target, and then you'll see the status as in how far are you along in achieving that target. And then this is just that list that I mentioned to you already. So all of the information that you need for filling out your applications and managing all the information to do with finance. When somebody sends them in the form, you'd have them there as an attachment. So if I clicked into recent audited accounts, you can have an attachment file there and upload it if it's on your computer, or somebody could send it in to you via a form. Again, I have governing document. You could have your memorandum and articles of association and upload there. I don't think I've actually added your governance code compliance form, but that's something else. You could upload information on previous funding, annual report. Back on the website as well, I have put a link in for Canva for creating a financial report as well. So you'll see that there's templates in there for creating your own fairly professional looking report. And again, I have put in the social media links there because I am telling groups all the time that they're missing a trick in the way that they are not keeping track of the analytics and insights from their social media accounts in terms of tracking their reach with their interactions with the public. That even it's very hard to measure it when you're in lockdown, but using your insights is a really good way. Now I'm going to go back and show you the juicy bit, which is the actual funding database. So when I click in here, I have a list of, there's 125 records here. Don't get excited because you'll have heard of probably about 50 of them already. I just try and keep track of funds as they come up, and then I'll add in an attachment or the website link for the actual funder. And this again is why I like, and then you can put in the deadline there, and you can put in the amount. So I will share this. This link is in the website that you'll all have. You see a lot of the funds again are Pobal ones. I have that done in the grid view. If I wanted to look at it in gallery view, it'll show all of the latest funds by outdoor recreation infrastructure, the date that it was posted on, the any information on the funds that are coming up. But again, I mentioned Funding Point is your resource to go to if you're probably registered with Funding Point already. If you're not, I think it's €120 a year, and that is the biggest database in Ireland from the wheel with all of the funds on it. I don't have the resources to keep this updated as much as I'd like, but I'm doing my best. As new funds come on board, I put them into it. And I haven't taken certain ones out, even when the deadline's passed, because they kind of come back the following year as well. And I like to just keep track of previous programs. So it's worth having a look through all of the different funds that are there. You may have heard of a lot of them already. The most topical one at the minute is all our rural future policy and the calls from there. I've put in then guides from the wheel on financing your future. I've put in tools for funding. This is just a video guide for creating fundraising videos. And actually that's something that I was working with somebody yesterday, and I'll come out of this and come back to you. And they're probably about the most knowledgeable person I know in terms of putting in funding applications. They really, really know their stuff, and they just asked me to take a look at their application, and I did. And at the end of the application, I was none the wiser what the application was for. And that sounds like sometimes people, it can be so jargon heavy and so technical, and somebody knows their topic so well that they don't actually, I'm using a term here, dumb it down. I told her she needed to dumb it down for somebody who didn't understand the sector, because there's no guarantee that the person reading it knows what you're talking about. And what I think the key to that is creating a little explainer video. And even if it's only, and it's becoming more and more common that funders are asking for a YouTube video or a small one. So I'm recommending, whatever your tech skills are, Canva that we talked about last week has a fantastic little video creation function in it, that it's not about having a top tech Scorsese type directed, polished production, but having your message explained in maybe 4 or 5 slides that's just really, really simple. And I know we're not here talking about funding, but I just think it's the one bit that people are missing. On a very simple level, what problem are you trying to solve? Sorry, who are you? What problem are you trying to solve? What are you looking for? What's your solution? When are you going to do it? On a video. And it's, people can get bogged down in writing 5 pages and miss the actual crux of, miss writing 3 simple sentences that are just explaining what people are actually trying to do. So I'll just go back to share the last few bits of this. I have been talking about tools for funding, and I haven't actually added some of the new ones here. And I don't know if we talked about this last week, but even in the last 2 weeks, I'm noticing new aspects on social media for raising funds, like Instagram donate button and stars on Facebook. For now, tiny amounts that people are getting, but it's gone that way in lockdown that people are starting to find ways to use social media for raising money as well. So things like the buy a badge tool on Instagram, stars on Facebook, and donate on Instagram are new features that are just showing the way that social media companies are trying to come up with ways for nonprofits to fundraise. I'm mentioning loans here, Community Finance Ireland, Cloncredo, Social Finance Ireland. These are organisations that are really, really approachable. When I stop sharing and come back to you, because I think this is probably the most benefit. How many of you here from a thumbs up have a relationship with somebody in Cloncredo or Social Finance Ireland? And when I say have a relationship, I mean, do you know them? Because what I'm finding is these are wonderful assets. Yeah, Margaret, you can attest to this. These are, and Western Development Commission are brilliant as well. All of these organisations, when you look at them on paper, they look like scary organisations that don't want to talk to the general public or the community, or you get the feeling that you're bothering them. And I try and say to people, any opportunity, if there's an information session being held by Social Finance Ireland or Cloncredo, they give out loans and bridging loans to community organisations. They're delighted to talk to people and build relationships with community organisations. What happens is people tend not to talk to them only when they're looking for something. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they only reach out when they're looking for a loan or they're looking for information. These are the organisations that you should be familiarising yourself with long before you're looking for anything. And what that means is if you put your organisation on their radar and they know that you exist, they're really, really helpful, and they can be giving you advice on what systems to put in place years before you actually start looking for a loan. I'm going to put it like the credit union. You know, you probably find out when you go into the credit union that you should have done something 6 months previously or a year previously, and it's the same. So I would highly recommend that people reach out to, and even the Western Development Commission as well, and the NWRA, the Northwest Regional Assembly. All these organisations are there as support organisations for our sector, and the onus, if we don't reach out to them, you know, it's hard for them to come and find people. So even if that's only getting a relationship on social media or reaching out on LinkedIn or sending a message and saying, I'm not actually looking for anything at the minute, but just want to find out what supports you provide for community organisations. Because, and I say the same thing for funding, when it comes to putting in applications, it really makes a massive difference if you know who the person is the other side of it. And it's not just a name on a form or an organisation on a form, you actually have a personality behind it, and you're more likely to, if you can see and be aware of the work that someone's doing in their organisation before their application comes in the door, it's really, really going to help you. There's one last thing to go through. You're nearly off the hook, folks. I've added something in here just because I think it's a really useful resource. A couple of years ago, I attended a session in Limerick for, it was Social Enterprise Day in Thomond Park, and got to go out and visit all of these community cafes in Limerick that were set up by the local partnership. And they set up cafes in disadvantaged areas, and then they produced a guide. So while I was saying to you earlier that we're not great at sharing resources, this is an example where they took the learning from setting up the cafe in the community and documented it all and then shared it with other organizations. So things like what you need to put in place to set one up. And I'm really just showing it to you, whether you ever were thinking of setting one up or not, just to have a look at the guide and see how they've shared the learning. There's just a link there on competitions, and the last one is just awards that community. There's an attachment here for not-for-profit award schemes, things that people can apply for. And then the last one is, these are 3 websites that I mentioned. Thriftify already. DoGood.ie is a student-led project in Cork, and they want to sell things for charity. They want to make it easier to set a shop up online. And then BuySocial.ie is just a campaign online for promoting buying from charities. And I'll stop sharing and come back to you. I saw yesterday that Jeff Bezos has trillions and trillions, and I'm trying to say to people, stop buying from Amazon, please buy from an Irish provider or your local town or village. Or so that said, I'm going to ask, does anybody know any Irish companies selling ring lights for lighting for your computers or tech products for working from home? If you do, send me a message afterwards, because I don't want to order from Amazon if there's someone down the road needs the business. Okay, it is 2 minutes to go. Any questions from anybody or any follow-up information that you need? You're all very well behaved. No. On that note, then, Margaret, did you want to ask anything, or?
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Nice, thank you. There's a lot in that again. It's a heavy session.
It's a lot of information. As I said, if you took 10% from it or 20%, and like last week, keep the resources, keep them in your filing cabinet. And if you need to come back in 6 months' time and refer, as I said, that's all it is. It's about knowing that that information is there. It isn't, I don't expect anyone going to rush out and do all of that. It's taken me a year to put some of those resources together. So I really don't think that any of you are going to just rush out and put it all in place. But if you just did one system that made your life a bit easier, or as I say to everybody, if there's one question that staff drive you demented with, going, where can I find, and you're always chasing it up, just have a little system in place where people have access to information. Thank you all so much. And thanks, Margaret, for all your hard work in organising the session. Take care.
Thanks everybody for attending. We will have another calendar of workshops out for June and July, and I'll get those out maybe in the next week. There's a few difference. A lot of those sessions coming up are around COVID and reopening and risk assessment and that type of thing. But I'll share them with everybody as soon as they're available. And Eilish, thank you for this month. It's been great. A lot of information shared over 3 sessions. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye. I'm going to stop recording now.